It wasn't that long ago that if you wanted to self-host an AI for coding, you had to accept a pretty big performance hit. But things are changing, and they're changing fast. The gap between open source and the big proprietary models is shrinking. And for teams that need total control over their data and their own infrastructure, well, self-hosting has become a massive strategic advantage. So how do you even begin to choose? Let's dive deep and compare two of the absolute heaviest hitters out there today, GLM 5 and Kimi K 2.5.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start by pitting these two titans against each other on performance. Then, we'll get down to brass tacks and talk about the hardware you'll actually need to run them. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of licenses and stability. The boring but crucial stuff. We'll even take a look at the companies behind the code. By the end of this, you're going to have a super clear framework to help you make the right call for your project. All right, first round, power and performance. The question here isn't just which model is better, it's which model is better for you.
Okay, I love how this slide frames it because it gets right to the point. Think of GLM 5 as your agentic engineer. It's like an architect. It's built for those really complex, multi-step projects that need a lot of planning and thinking ahead. It basically acts like a little autonomous agent trying to solve big engineering problems. Now, Kimi K 2.5, that's your coding specialist. It's the master craftsman. It is just brilliant at raw code generation, especially when it comes to front-end work and visual tasks.
And the data backs this up perfectly. Check it out. On the LiveBench benchmark for agentic coding, that's the complex stuff, GLM 5 is the undisputed #1 open source model. But then you look at the standard coding average, and Kimi K 2.5 jumps into the top spot. But the number that really just makes your jaw drop? That 99% score for Kimi K 2.5 on HumanEval. That's for pure, raw code generation. A near-perfect score is, well, it's just insane.
So yeah, these models are incredibly powerful. But all that power, it comes at a price. Let's talk about the hardware you're actually going to need to run these beasts on your own servers.
Let me be crystal clear here. You are not running either of these on your gaming PC. Not going to happen. GLM 5 demands some serious enterprise-grade iron. We're talking a pair of professional RTX 6000s at the absolute minimum. Kimi 2.5 is right there with it, needing a full-on production cluster of H100s or A100s. The main takeaway here is that self-hosting at this level is a major infrastructure investment.
And it's not just the GPUs. Take a look at the memory these things need. GLM 5 requires at least 128 gigs of combined RAM and VRAM, but Kimi K 2.5's recommendation for a stable production setup is a whopping 512 gigs of RAM. That right there could be a huge deciding factor depending on what your hardware budget looks like.
Okay, so let's say you've got the hardware sorted. How do you actually get these things running? Well, for top-tier production performance, VLM is pretty much the go-to choice for serving. If you're looking for another efficient option, SGLang is fantastic. But hey, if you're just dipping your toes in, Allima makes it so easy to get started with local testing. And for all you folks who prefer a nice graphical interface, LM Studio is the perfect tool for experimenting right on your desktop.
Okay, now for a topic that's easy to overlook but is absolutely critical for any business: the licenses and the real-world stability of these models. This is the fine print, and trust me, it can make or break your entire project.
And this right here is a huge difference. GLM 5 is under a standard MIT license. That means it's totally unrestricted. Go nuts. Use it commercially, modify it, no strings attached. Kimi K 2.5, though, uses a modified MIT license. It's almost the same, but it adds one really important clause if you hit it big commercially.
And here's that clause. If your product becomes a massive success, and we're talking over 100 million monthly users or $20 million bucks a month in revenue, you have to give Kimi K 2.5 a shout-out somewhere prominent. Now, for most startups, this is what you'd call a good problem to have, right? But for a huge enterprise, it's definitely a strategic point to consider. Now, let's talk about something you won't find on a nice, clean benchmark report: real-world stability. Because what users are finding is that both of these models can get a little strange when you push them.
This is a perfect example from a user on Reddit. They said that if you push GLM 5's context window to its absolute limit, you have a good chance of getting garbage, real garbage. This is such an important reminder that when you're working with models this powerful, you have to be ready for those weird edge case failures.
When you choose a model, you're not just picking a piece of software. You're placing a bet on the team, the organization that built it.
So let's take a closer look at the backers behind GLM 5 and Kimi K2.5.
The team behind GLM 5 is Z.ai, and their story is pretty fascinating. They started out in the labs of the super prestigious Tsinghua University. But Z.ai isn't just some academic project. In early 2026, they actually made history by becoming the world's first publicly traded foundation model company. Being on the stock exchange gives them a totally unique and powerful position in the market.
And you can just see their methodical progress on this timeline. From their founding, they just consistently dropped these influential open source models, one after another, building up all this momentum that led right to their IPO. And then, boom, they launched GLM 5 just a month later. This paints a picture of a very structured, very ambitious long-term plan.
And in the other corner, you've got Moonshot AI, the creators of Kimi K2.5. They are a major AI startup and a direct competitor to Z.ai. They've really made a name for themselves with their incredibly ambitious trillion-parameter Kimi models.
When you look at who owns them, these two companies couldn't be more different. Z.ai is this publicly traded giant with a super complex web of founders, huge corporate investors, and even state-affiliated funds. That gives them a rock-solid foundation, but it also means they've got a lot of different people to keep happy. Moonshot AI, on the other hand, is your classic venture-backed startup. This lets them be nimble and move fast, but it also means their future is, well, a little less certain. These differences are going to have a huge impact on their long-term plans and support.
Okay, so we've weighed the performance, the hardware costs, the licenses, and the backers. So, how do you actually make the right choice? Let's bring it all home with the final verdict.
This little guide really simplifies the whole thing based on what matters most to you. If your top priority is complex, automated engineering tasks, GLM 5 is the clear winner. No contest. If you just need the absolute best, purest code generation possible, Kimi 2.5's insane 99% on human eval makes it the obvious choice. If you want maximum commercial freedom, no strings, no worries, then GLM 5's pure MIT license wins. And kind of surprisingly, even though it's a massive model, GLM 5 actually has a relatively lower hardware barrier, especially on the RAM side, and that could easily be the final deciding factor for a lot of people.
But you know, at the end of the day, picking between GLM 5 and Kimi K2.5 is about more than just specs on a page. It's really a choice between two totally different philosophies. You've got the publicly traded, systems engineering approach of Z.ai versus the nimble, venture-backed, specialist approach of Moonshot AI. You're not just picking a model, you're picking an entire ecosystem and a vision that you want to build your future on. So the real question is, which future will you choose?